Good afternoon. Welcome, everyone. I'm Audrey Russo. I'm President and CEO of the Pittsburgh Technology Council, and I am joined by Marie Poloni, the STEM Engagement Coordinator of our nonprofit arm called 40 by 80. And we are thrilled to have you join us today for our very first week of a virtual summit, STEM Summit. And we have so many people that have been registered all week, over 900 students, parents, and educators. And you'll see a slide giving a shout out to all the schools in attendance. So you might not know anything about the Tech Council. This might be the first time. So I just want to tell you a little bit about Tech Council and 40 by 80. We are an organization that is a group of over 1,000 regional technology businesses and advanced manufacturing firms and life sciences. We come together to make sure that Southwestern Pennsylvania is an amazing place for people to live and work and build companies, so that together we're going to change the world. And that's just what we're going to hear about today. So what's the most important thing that these companies have asked us to work on? That's talent. In other words, they wanted to tell all of you about some of the fun and amazing, exciting jobs that are here right in our region to pursue in Pennsylvania. I also want you to know that this is being recorded, and also thanks to Pittsburgh PCTV, that's being simultaneously broadcast and will be available on demand on their website. And if you live in the city of Pittsburgh, you can watch us live, Channel 21 on Comcast or Channel 47. And then of course on Apple TV, Roku, and Fire TV, and searching the download for PCTV app. So I am thrilled to pass the baton and introduce Louis Van On. You might not realize that he really is a rock star that has embraced Pittsburgh, kicked our butts to the moon and back. He has really the only startup company in our region that's actually valued at over $1 billion. Lots of zeros, but more important than that, what you're going to hear from is a guy who has passion and clarity about his work. And it's been an honor for me to know him, to watch him develop. And I know that you are going to be so stoked when you hear him. So I'm passing the baton to Louis Van On, the co-founder of Duolingo.
Thank you, Audrey. I am Luis Van On. I am currently sitting at the Duolingo office, which is in East Liberty. And I am by myself in this entire office. I don't know if you can see it. I'm going to move. There's the office, and there's more floors, but I am by myself. And I decided to come here to make sure that my internet wouldn't fail for my house. So I'm the CEO and co-founder of Duolingo. Hopefully some of you have used the app. It's basically an app to teach languages. I guess I'm supposed to tell you a little bit about myself, and then I can tell you more about Duolingo a little later. But in my case, I was not born in Pittsburgh. I was born in Guatemala, which is right below Mexico. And I grew up there, and I went to high school there, and then I came to college in the United States. I went to Duke University. And then after that, I came to Carnegie Mellon. This is why I'm in Pittsburgh, because I came to Carnegie Mellon to get a PhD in computer science. And I stayed. I then became a professor at Carnegie Mellon. And then in the process, I have started 3 companies. This is the 3rd company that I have started, Duolingo. And yeah, that's, I will tell you more about Duolingo in a little bit. But I think in the meantime, we have a few other little things to do.
Thank you, Luis. I am Marie Poloni. I am the STEM engagement coordinator for 40 by 80, working here on the STEM Summit as well. And we do. Luis, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to everybody out there for joining us. We really want maximum participation from everyone who is on the call today. So if you look down at the bottom of your screen, because we have some middle school students, high school students, we have it pretty locked down, but you are definitely able to engage. So if you see the Q&A section, you're going to be able to ask Luis questions, and I'm going to do my very best to get to them. No one can see your name, no one can see your question except for us as the hosts. If you also look at the raising hand option, you're able to put your hand up, and that lets me know that you have a question, and I'll make sure that I can get to that. We also have some student panelists joining us. We have Ajna. If you guys want to show your faces, you can, and give a little wave. We have some juniors in high school joining us. Ajna and Helena and Jesse. They're all going to be helping us today as well and asking questions. And just a note for those of you who are watching through Pittsburgh Community Television, you're able to ask questions, but unfortunately, we're not able to see them. So only those on the Zoom webinar have that functionality. So I didn't want you to think we were ignoring you. So we're going to get to it. So Luis, we have a question for the students or the participants on the call just to see how much they know about Duolingo. How many people out there, you're going to see the polling pop up on your screen. How many people do you think are using Duolingo right now? Everybody go ahead and place your vote. We'll see how your answers compare to the real answer. Do you think it's 5 million, 10 million, 100 million, or 300 million people using Duolingo? No one thinks 5 million. They think it's way bigger than that, Luis, just to let you know where it's headed. They're sort of going back and forth between 10 million, 100 million. Go ahead and keep placing those votes. I'm going to share the results in just a second. All right, it looks like most of you think, and you should see the results there on your screen, most of you think 100 million people are using Duolingo. Well, we have some news for you. You do not become registered at $1 billion for nothing. 300 million people are using Duolingo right now, which is really cool. Luis, what does that look like on your end to have that many people using Duolingo?
I'm extremely proud of what we've been able to accomplish. I mean, we get a lot of emails every day about things that people like, things people dislike, and yeah, it's a lot of fun.
It's awesome. I mean, that's something that really can make Pittsburgh so proud. Jesse, why don't you go ahead and ask your question of Luis? And you can show your face to do that.
Hi, I'm Jessie Aldero, and I'm a junior. And my question for Luis is, what was your educational pathway? How did you get to start to create an amazing company like Duolingo?
That's a great question. So I was like a normal kid in high school. I was a little nerdy, and I really liked math. And then I came to college in the US to study math, basically. I didn't have a job. My first job actually was until late in college when I was a grader for math homeworks. That was my first job in college. And then after that, I became to try to get a PhD in computer science because my goal was to become a professor in computer science. But I ended up, I was a professor for a while, but then I ended up starting a company after that. And I loved being a professor, but I happened to like running a company a lot more. What else to say about my educational pathway? I think that's about it. I was always bad at the arts. I just point that out. I've gotten a little better, but that was never my forte.
But it's neat because language is for sure considered an art. And so it's really cool to show that even if it's not a strength, you can make a success out of it.
Yes, not only that, I was very bad at learning foreign languages.
Really?
I did learn English at a very young age, so I don't actually remember having learned English. But when I was in high school, I took a French class, and I did very badly in it. And the main reason I took the French class was because I had a crush on a girl. And unfortunately, I failed at both the French class and the girl. But yeah, I've never been good at learning languages. Now I've gotten a lot better because of Duolingo, but yeah, I've never been good at it.
Well, good. That actually brings us to our next question. Ajna, are you ready?
For sure. So
Okay.
the second question
I'm gonna pull it up. Hold on.
is how many languages does Duolingo teach for English speakers? And the answers are 20, 25, 30, or 35 languages.
All right, we'll just let that go for another second. Make sure you place your vote. This is really impressive. This answer definitely surprised me. I'll put the results up on the screen. Duolingo actually has 35 different languages for English speakers. That's huge. That is it. So much learning available for all of those that have English as our primary language to learn other languages. That is so cool. It really is. All right, we're going to totally hand this over to you, Louis, and let you just wow us with what you have for us today.
Uh-oh. Okay.
No pressure.
Let me try to share my screen. Hopefully this will work. Okay. Can you all see my screen? Yes. Okay, I am going to present. Okay, can you still all see my screen, but now in presentation mode? Okay, good. So I'm going to tell you a little, that's funny. We have these lights that turn themselves off when I haven't been moving very much. So I'm gonna go turn them on in 1 second. I'll be back. Okay, there, I just had to move. Okay, sorry about that. We're trying to be good for energy, but I guess I just don't move enough. Okay, so let me tell you a little about Duolingo and kind of how we got started and some of the cool things that we're doing. So we started Duolingo about 8 years ago. We launched in 2012. I was in a very fortunate position in my life. I had just sold my second company to Google. And so I wanted to work on something that was related to my passion because I didn't have the need to really work anymore. So I wanted to do something related to my passion, and my passion has always been education. So I wanted to start a project. At the time it was a project, but eventually became a company. I wanted to start a company or a project that would give access to education to people. My views on education have always been very related to the fact that I'm from Guatemala. If you don't know much about Guatemala, it's a very poor country. And a lot of people talk about education as something that brings equality to different social classes, but I always saw it as the opposite, as something that can bring inequality, because what happens in practice, particularly in poor countries like Guatemala, is that people who have a lot of money can buy themselves the best education in the world, whereas people who don't have very much money barely learn how to read and write. So I wanted to do something that would give equal access to education to everybody. Now, education is very general. I mean, there's math, there's history, there's all kinds of different subjects. And I thought it was better to start with just one subject. And I picked teaching languages. And in particular, the reason I picked teaching languages was because of learning English. Outside of the United States, a lot of people want to learn English. In fact, there's about 1.5 billion people in the world who are currently trying to learn English. And the reason for that is because it can really change people's lives. In most countries, if you know English, you can double the amount of money you make. So I wanted to do something that would give access to learning English to everybody. But if you're going to teach English, you may as well teach all kinds of languages. So the idea was we're going to launch something where people can learn languages, and it's going to be entirely free. That was what we started Duolingo with. And that's what we wanted to do. So we did that, and we launched about 8 years ago. We launched a website, Duolingo.com, and then an app for the iPhone, and then an app for Android phones. We were very fortunate that as soon as we launched, Duolingo became very popular. And in fact, since then, Duolingo has basically been the most downloaded education app of any kind of education for the last 8 years in a row. And there's a lot of really staggering numbers that, we've grown a lot. For example, there are more people learning languages on Duolingo in the United States than there are people learning languages in the whole US public school system. And of course, we teach a lot of languages. Here are some of the examples. We teach a ton of languages. I mean, we teach English, but we also teach Spanish and French and German, and basically all the languages you've heard of. We also teach High Valyrian from Game of Thrones. We teach Klingon from Star Trek. We teach Irish. I don't know what this says about the world, but there are more people actively learning High Valyrian than there are people learning Vietnamese. This is, I'm not endorsing this, that's just a fact. It's interesting with all the different languages that we teach. Obviously the big ones, a lot of people want to learn, but the smaller languages are very interesting because because Duolingo is so popular, we can make a real dent in the number of people that speak the language. For example, Irish is a really good example. Irish is a relatively small language. In fact, it's an endangered language. That at some point it may be the case that everybody who speaks Irish, nobody will speak Irish in a while if it continues going this way. There are 94,000 native Irish speakers in the world, but we have 1 million people actively learning Irish on Duolingo. So we can actually multiply the number of speakers by 10, which is why whenever we add a small language on Duolingo, we actually can change its course. And this is why, for example, we get lobbied a lot by different, governments of smaller countries to add their languages. And we keep trying to add more and more languages. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to add every single language. There's over 6,000 languages in the world. We only teach 35. So, we're going to continue adding, but I don't think we're going to basically get to every language.
I'm going to stop you there with a question from Logan. Logan, in listening to you starting this and looking at all of the different languages that are on our screen, I mean, High Valyrian, that is like fantastic. But Logan wants to know, what was the most difficult aspect of starting Duolingo? Was it finding investors and funding? Was it developing the software? Was it creating your business plan? When you were looking at just starting it, what was the hardest thing?
I would say the hardest thing and the most important thing if you want to start a company is making sure that the thing you make, the product, is really good. That was the hardest thing. We spent a lot of effort trying to make, at the time, a website that was good. One of the interesting things is with the first version of Duolingo that we never released, we tried it among ourselves. At the time, I was trying, it taught 2 languages. It taught Spanish, and I wrote the Spanish course because I'm a native Spanish speaker, and it taught German, and my co-founder is a native German speaker. So I was trying to learn German and he was trying to learn Spanish. We realized we couldn't keep ourselves motivated because it was really, really, really boring. And it took us a long time to get to a point where it is actually enjoyable to learn a language on Duolingo. So I'd say the hardest thing was just making a really good thing that people like to use.
It was engaging.
Yeah.
Emma had a great question too. In designing it, why did you choose an owl?
Because owl, at least in Western cultures, I've since learned that this is not true everywhere, but at least in Western cultures, an owl is a symbol of knowledge. Mm-hmm. And so we thought we'd have an owl. Now there's a weirdness because our owl is a green owl, and there's a story behind that. It turns out when we were starting to do this, we had a few graphic designers who were supposed to draw our mascot. And they were asking us questions about it. And my co-founder said, I don't care what you do, but I have one stipulation, and it is that I hate the color green, so please don't do anything with green. And we thought it was funny to make the mascot of the company that he had co-started be the color that he hates. So to this day, he has had to live with the fact that he hates the color green. And that's it. There's a kind of, it's not a great reason, but that was the reason. It's basically an internal joke. It's an internal joke for why it's a green owl.
That's great. I'll let you continue on and I'll get back to student questions in a little bit.
Thank you, Marie. So we teach a lot of languages, and it's you know, a lot of people learning them. Now you may wonder, you know, why is it that Duolingo became so popular? There are other ways to learn a language, but why is it that Duolingo became so popular? And there's a few reasons. The first one is that it really, you know, it's free, and that's a big deal. When we first launched Duolingo, most of the ways there were to learn a language were very expensive. For example, the most common way, at least with software, to learn a language at the time was this thing called Rosetta Stone, which cost about, at the time, it cost about $700. Whereas we put out an app that was free. And so that's one reason why it grew a lot. Another reason why it grew a lot is because we realized early on, and this is related to what I was talking about, we realized early on that one of the hardest things, no, not just one of the hardest, the hardest thing about learning a language by yourself is keeping yourself motivated. It's just very hard to stay motivated. So since we realized that, we actually have worked a lot in making Duolingo really feel like a game. So this, for example, is the home screen of the app. The way it works is we split up the language into multiple units that we call skills. So for example, there may be a skill about food, and that's where we teach you all about you know, how to order in a restaurant, etc. There is a skill about, there's one here that's called Let's Fly. That's probably where we teach you all the things about what you would do if you're flying, like things like, you know, here's my ticket, or, you know, can I have a like a soda at the airplane, or something like that. So we split up the language into multiple units that we call skills. And at the very beginning, there's only one skill that is unlocked, and you have to complete it to unlock the next row, and then you have to complete that row to unlock the next row, etc. So there's this unlocking mechanism that is actually pretty fun, because you feel really good when you unlock the next level or the next row. And then there's a lot of other things. For example, if you look at the top of the screen there's that 907. That's our streak. That means it's basically the number of days that you've used Duolingo in a row. This is a very powerful motivator. For example, for this particular user, has used Duolingo 907 days in a row. And if you don't use it tomorrow, you lose it and you go back to zero. And so there are people who really, really care about this number. And that's one thing that really gets people to come back every day. One thing about learning a language is that you basically, it takes quite a while to learn a language, and you really have to form a habit out of it. So we spent a lot of effort trying to form a habit. The other thing is that when you're actually learning, the way learning actually works on Duolingo is that you do these exercises that whenever, you know, basically we give you these little exercises, and for every exercise, you can either get it right or wrong. And whenever you get it right, there's a lot of cool things that happen. I mean, there's a little grading ribbon that says you did a good job. We have the little character that says the stuff, do a mini dance. There's also this progress bar at the top that measures, you know, how many of the exercises you've gotten right. Basically, the idea is that you have to complete that progress bar to finish the session. There are also these hearts at the top. Every time you get an answer wrong, you lose a life. And so there's a lot of these little gaming mechanics, and that's basically what has made Duolingo so popular. It's that it's free, and it's also fun to use it to learn a language. One of the things that people may not know, though, about Duolingo is that even though it really looks like a simple little game, in the background, a lot of people don't know that we use a lot of sophistication to give you those lessons. So whenever you start a lesson on Duolingo, we actually use everything that you've done so far on Duolingo. We know all the mistakes you've made, all the things that we've taught you, all the things that you were very good at, all the things that you were not so good at. And whenever you start a lesson, we try to give you things that are tailored just for you, that try to emphasize the things that maybe you need more practice with. And we try to give you things that are not too easy for you, but also not too hard. If they're too hard, it's frustrating, so you're gonna go away. If they're too easy, you know, it's boring. So we try to find things that you're gonna be about 80% likely to get correct. So that's you know, there's a lot of sophistication in the background that people may not realize. Another thing that I think is really interesting with Duolingo, and that has made us has really worked for us, is that we do a lot of experiments with our users. And this may sound a little weird, but let me explain what that means. Sometimes we want to know whether we want to make a change, and we don't know whether we should make the change. For example, we may want to know Should we teach you plurals before adjectives or adjectives before plurals? And sometimes we don't know the answer to this. And what we do is we actually do an experiment with our users. So for the next 50,000 users that sign up, to half of them, we will teach them one way. We will teach them plurals before adjectives. To the other half, we will teach them the other way. So we will teach them adjectives before plurals. And then we measure which ones learn better. Do the first group learn better? Does the first group learn better, or does the second group learn better? And then we know once and for all that it turns out that for Spanish, it is better to teach plurals before adjectives. And so we do that all the time. And because of that, Duolingo is actually getting better every week, because we are figuring out from millions of people how to teach better. And because of that, Duolingo has actually become pretty effective. For example, if you use Duolingo for about 30 hours, you learn the equivalent of one college semester of that language, which is actually quite successful, because usually one class for a college semester takes a lot longer than 30 hours.
That actually answers Jamie's question. Jamie said, are you able to become fluent in a language by only using Duolingo? So you would say yes.
Yeah, so there's, I would, but I really want to be a little more nuanced about that. What people mean by fluent can mean a lot of things. And so it's kind of hard to decide. I do not believe you can take Duolingo and start from zero and get to the point where you are the poet laureate in that language. I don't think you can get there. That requires years of reading and doing all kinds of stuff. I do believe that you can get Duolingo and use it to the point where you could get a job in that language.
And then become fluent.
Yes, but then, if you get at that time, you probably would still have a thick accent. You probably still make some mistakes, and you probably would not understand, very kind of complicated wordplay, for example. So yes, you can get to a point where it's very useful. But if you really want to get to the point where your language is, perfect, you probably need, to start doing things like watching TV shows in that language and stuff like that, because that's where you get a lot of the extra culture and stuff.
Like the slang. So John was asking, dialects can be unique. Would this then be a sub-functionality, for example, for Italian?
Yes, this is a great question. There's every language. I mean, for example, even English, right? British English sounds pretty different than American English. Southern American English sounds different than Northeastern American English, and the differences actually get much bigger. In Spanish, there's a lot of countries that speak Spanish natively, and there's I don't know, it's like 30 or something. But they all have their own little version of Spanish, which can vary quite a bit. We do not make a distinction. We actually try to teach what we call vanilla of that language. So we try to teach. In the case of English, we use an American accent, but we try to make it kind of the most. It's what you would hear if you were to listen to like CNN or NPR. It's the most vanilla kind of American accent. We do the same with Spanish. We try to make it the most vanilla accent. So we do not distinguish between dialects. The main reason for that is because it would complicate things a lot for us, and it's kind of hard. We're not in the we don't want to be in the game of saying like, well, the Texas accent is actually different than the Arkansas accent, so we're going to teach something a little different. So we don't want to be in that game. So we try to teach, kind of the most standard way.
That's perfect. That is an excellent answer. I want to share this last one for you before you keep going on. We actually have an 8-year-old on the call today who loves learning languages on Duolingo, which is really cool.
Awesome.
And this is William. And William would also love if you could include more stories that are good for kids, because William's 8 and he wants some stories in the language he's learning. So that was his suggestion in the Q&A.
Yes. So actually, stories is a feature inside Duolingo. There's a tab at the bottom that's called Stories. That's where you can read really mini short stories that are pretty engaging, and it's to practice your reading. We are in the process of adding more stories. Actually, one of the things that we're starting to do right now, the stories are relatively generic in terms of the characters. We're about to standardize our cast of characters. So, for example, this character that you see right there is, we don't really talk about her name, but it's a character that her name internally is called Zari, and we are actually going to have a lot of the stories are going to be based on Zari. And so we're going to start really having a world of characters inside Duolingo that I think is going to make the app even more compelling than it is. The last thing that I wanted to talk about really quickly is this, which is obviously this is a map of the world. This is, every country is color-coded based on the most commonly learned language in that country according to Duolingo. So obviously we have users in every single country of the world, Duolingo. We even have users in North Korea. We have users in every single country in the world. And in here, we have color-coded every country with the most commonly learned language in that country. In the United States, it's Spanish. In Canada, it's French. You can see in most countries in the world, that's kind of the pinkish color, the most commonly learned language is English. This makes a lot of sense. That's basically the language that most people want to learn. There's some kind of interesting ones here. I'm not going to talk too much about them because there's a question later about one of these. But there's a few interesting ones here. For example, German, near Germany, a lot of the most commonly learned language is German. So you can see stuff like that. But this is, this gives us a lot of really interesting data. And we can see how things change over time also. So we start seeing, for example, in Europe, a lot of times the most commonly learned language is usually English, but usually the second most commonly learned language in European countries is the language of that country. So for example, in Germany, the second most commonly learned language is German. And you would think, why is it that Germans are needing to learn German? This is strange. And the reason is because of immigration. And particularly refugees a lot of times use Duolingo because it's free, and they're using it to learn the native language of the country, in order to be able to speak to people. So that's something that makes us really proud. And in fact, probably the proudest thing that about Duolingo, the thing that has made me the proudest about Duolingo is a few years ago, maybe 2-3 years ago, in the same week, I found out that Duolingo was being used by refugees in Europe to learn the language. And at the same week, I found out that Bill Gates was actually using Duolingo to learn a language. And when I found those two things out, that is what made me the proudest, because it really is the whole spectrum. I mean, on one end, Syrian refugees are really on one end of the spectrum. They really don't have very much money. It's kind of the lowest socioeconomic scale in terms of how much money you have. And on the other side of the spectrum, at the time, Bill Gates was the richest man in the world. So the same app was being used by refugees and the richest man in the world, which to me basically said more money cannot buy you a better education.
Absolutely. I mean, that is so powerful. You must have realized that you really had a worldwide reach when you heard that. And it goes, Elaine said in the chat, do you think the success of Duolingo is evident that the world is progressing towards a more accepting, diverse society? Or maybe Duolingo is also a contributor to that?
Well, hopefully we are contributing to that. I'm hoping that the world is becoming more accepting. I think we see some countries becoming more accepting, and I think we see some countries becoming less accepting. It's actually an interesting thing when you run a worldwide business like ours. Some of the exercises on Duolingo, you have a clearly male character saying a sentence about their husband. That person obviously is gay. That is okay in the United States these days. There are many countries where that is not okay, and we have to either live with it, and basically some people will complain, or close it. So far, we have decided to live with it, and so we do get complaints from certain countries about certain exercises that, this is just against everything we believe in, but we've stuck with it. So this is the type of stuff. Yeah, and this is the type of stuff that you have to deal with. Also, languages themselves have a lot of really kind of bad things. Not just bad. I wouldn't say bad things. That's just how the way the language works. Spanish, for example, the words for a lot of professions are only the male word exists. And it's like, the female work doesn't even exist. And of late, people have started kind of making up words for that. But that's just an inherent thing of the language that, hopefully over time it'll change.
I think absolutely. And especially with the work that you're doing and reaching so many people. And like you said, so many different socioeconomic classes. Are you on here, Helena? Can you show your face for your question that you have for Luis?
I'm actually going to stop sharing now.
Okay. Yep. I like having Luis's face big.
Hi, yeah, so I'm Helena. I'm a junior in high school. So what I was wondering today was, as a student, if my goal was to work at your company one day, what advice would you give me?
Oh, that's a really good question. Well, it depends. We hire a lot of different types of people, and also, basically different types of professions. The largest number of employees that we have is software engineers. So about 50% of the people that work at Duolingo are basically programmers. So they study computer science. So if you want to do that, you have to go to college and study computer science. You could also do electrical engineering or math, baby, and that's one way. But that's not the only type of person that we hire. We hire people who are linguists to help us, teach languages better. So, going to college and getting a linguistics degree. I mean, generally, to work at Duolingo, I would say you need a college degree. So linguistics is another thing. We also hire a lot of designers. So, basically, if you go to school for like graphic design, making the app look so pretty requires a lot of people that are extremely talented, that are either designers or illustrators or animators. We have a lot of those. And so, it's basically, we hire a lot of types of people. But generally, I would say that the most likely ones are software engineers, designers, and linguists.
That is a great question, and that was a fantastic answer. Brianna wants to know in our chat, do you think that you will ever have a sign language class?
Yeah, it's a great question. We get asked for it a lot. We haven't done it, and we probably will at some point. The one problem that we have is that it's actually pretty different to teach sign language than to teach all the other languages that we teach because of the writing system. I mean, I guess, the sign language uses the same writing system. So you have to basically add a lot of different things to the app, and that's why we haven't done it.
Okay, that's a great question. Ajna, do you want to do one more polling for everybody? I'm going to throw one up here.
Sure.
So we'll actually do two more, and we'll just see how well everybody was listening. I'll put the first one up there. Go ahead.
So this question is, what is the most popular language on Duolingo? Mandarin, Spanish, English, or Hindi?
Well, I think you were very engaging, Luis. It looks like they were paying attention. I'll end this poll and share the results. We had 69% say English. Is that correct, sir?
Yes, that is correct.
And then the other question, Ajna, you can do this one too. And I thought this was kind of neat because you really do start to think about different countries and what the countries are named and what the cultures are found in those countries, but what do they actually speak? Go ahead, Ajna.
So this question is, what is the most commonly studied language in Sweden? Swedish, Spanish, French, or English?
It's battling back and forth between Swedish and English. We're going to see here what the final result comes in as. It all depends if you were really paying attention to the map, if you're able to find Sweden on that map so quickly. Thank you, Ajna, for reading those and for reading the answers. All right, the end poll, 52% say Swedish, 32% say English. And you are correct, for everybody who is watching, that it is Swedish.
Yes.
English is number two.
And it is mostly by refugees. Most of the people who were born in Sweden do not need to learn Swedish on Duolingo, but refugees do.
That is excellent. My gosh, I have learned so much today, and for sure we'll be downloading Duolingo and using it even more. I've only gotten a chance to play around with it, but seeing especially the game functionalities is absolutely brilliant. I'm going to throw this back to Audrey for any final questions.
Me? Okay. Thank you, Louise. Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for joining us today. You know, we are doing this whole week and we're wrapping this week up, and next week we continue to have more guests. Monday, we're going to have one of the physicians, that's the chairman of the Department of Dermatology, working on a vaccine at the University of Pittsburgh Medical College. We're very excited about that for COVID. And then Tuesday, we have Chuck Hoover. He's the general manager at Facebook Reality Labs, and he is always fun. We have Allegheny Health Networks. They're going to be talking about what's happening in their own healthcare system. And then we're wrapping. Well, then Thursday, we have BNY Mellon, a senior specialist in information security, another lucrative opportunity in terms of careers. And then Friday, we wrap up with Julie Durrence at Uber Advanced Technologies, and she works on building self-driving cars. So Louise, we can so appreciate the time that you've taken with us. It's always a treat to hear you. It has been recorded. We are going to share that. We're going to keep track of you. We couldn't have done it without our sponsors, and that includes at the gold level, Bank of New York Mellon, Giant Eagle. At the silver level, it was Lanxess and SDLC Partners. At the bronze level, CGI and Industrial Scientific, and supporting sponsor, Giftja and Highmark. And they're all people who make our region who we are today. But Louise, we're proud of you. I'm proud of you. And all of you that joined today, this was a big treat. And I hope you got one little slice of what it's like to build an amazing company and the kind of leadership and skills that you could acquire to do this yourselves. So have a wonderful weekend. Everyone be safe. Use Duolingo. Make sure that you have the app downloaded, and stay safe, everyone. Thank you, Marie, and thank you, Louise.
Thank you, Audrey, and thank you, Marie. Bye, everybody.